I know you've been left wondering what I'm going to do for mud flaps with the Rebel Power Wagon flares on the dually, since there are no WeatherTech mud flaps for the Rebel or Power Wagon. Well, I bit the bullet on Black Friday. I got a heck of a deal on the mud flaps from WeatherTech that are made to fit dualies, just with the standard flare, the thinner flare. And as you can see, I was able to modify them to fit, and it's really not too bad. It's just a little tedious, and it just takes a little bit of time with a pencil and a Dremel and a belt sander. As you can see here, your fit and finish is going to be as good as your prep and the straightness of your cutting. So it's kind of like one of those deals where standing back 10 feet, it's going to look great. If you want to get in here with a magnifying glass, yeah, you can see there's a little light gap. But standing back here looks just fine. And if you want to be particular, you could come in with some black RTV and cover that gap up so that you can't see the light and so that mud doesn't ever shoot through. So my first cuts were actually a little more accurate. It's all about how you hold this piece up and mark it with your pencil, because this is the first one I did. I actually had this line cut straight and beautiful, and then I came in and took a little off here and a little off here, and I didn't need to. So it's one of those projects where you might be 90 seconds into this video and say, yeah, I'm out. I'm not going to go buy $200 mud flaps and cut them apart. But it's the best solution I found, so this is what we're going to rock with. So the first thing you want to do is just mock the mud flap up. You're going to come underneath and you're going to put that little black tab over the inner wheel liner. You can leave your screws in and use the screw heads as a visual of where this needs to be aligned. And then you're going to come in with your pencil and you're just going to trace out up to, what I did was I went to where the flap actually goes underneath the flare, because we go from being on the side or the outside to underneath. So that's about right there. So I traced this out and I cut this out first, and then I progressively mocked it back up tighter and tighter and tighter, and I kept tracing more. And then you can see my mark here is where I stopped, because we don't want to cut all the way. It's not going to be perfectly flush. Granted, I don't have my screw in here yet either, but it's not going to be perfectly flush, but we do need to leave some material at the top for strength. Otherwise, you're going to have a strip that's going to eventually just rip and break off. So here's what I'm talking about with that. You want to take this cut all the way to the top, because then this would be two independent pieces. You want to have a good chunk of this still connected to each other at the top. And on the second one, on the next side, I think I'll take even less material off. I'll probably stop about here. So that's what it looks like. You're going to cut along this top face, you're going to cut along this bottom face, and then you're going to smooth it all out. So the tools I'm using are a Dremel with cutoff wheel. I come down through here, make this rough cut, then I go like this and I make this rough cut. Then I put on this round deburring piece and I come in and I get this edge smooth. And then I take this over here and I use the belt sander. And this actually doesn't really grind the material off. It's actually smooth enough grit that it just kind of liquefies, or it melts the plastic, and so you can manipulate it and move the plastic around. So here you can see what I'm talking about, where it kind of just flattens and melts the plastic out, which I think probably helps give you some strength. So I think one of the key parts here is when you come to do this cut down here, don't cut into that. You can actually just do this cut roughly, do this one roughly, and then come in with this and bring it in like this and melt through until you go into your cut. And then that's going to give you a beautiful, strong corner at the bottom, because you don't want that crack to start spreading through there. And then same thing up here. You don't have to cut all the way through. You can just come in like this and then melt into your cut. And I suppose before I start on this one, this is what it comes like when it's new. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just line your spat up. This edge right here is what I'm looking at to get things lined up. And now you can see we just need to trace around the flare right there and get that initial cut, because you can see if I hold it tight against the spat, I have this huge gap. And so as we start cutting, this will start getting closer and closer until we're satisfied, and then you can bolt it on. And to just try to give you a final shot of this guy here installed, screws are fully tightened down. You will need one of the longer screws for the very bottom, preferably both of the bottoms, and the top screw and the mud flap can be one of the shorter ones. But if you remember from the flare installation, the back had longer screws, the front had shorter ones. So I just went in and degreased, wiped down with alcohol, put some black RTV in there just to block that light gap. And I mean, they're mud flaps, guys. They're going to get dirty. So I doubt you're going to even be able to tell that these things were modified unless, like I said, you get way deep down in there and really start staring at it. Now that I have the right side done, you can see how much the mud flap covers up the tire from a straight shot. I wish, if they would actually make these mud flaps for the Power Wagon flares, then they would stick out more. It'd be even better, but it's still decent enough. So here's the finished product for the rear. So you can see I barely had to cut any out on the rear. This was actually a lot easier than the front. So let me get this bolted on, and then I'll show you the final product on the rear. And here we have the final installed mud flap. So you can see I just put some goop up in there. Again, you'd have to get really close up in here to look at that and see any RTV in there. And in reality, you're going to have a gap at the seam normally anyway, so it's not... Crap. Just realized I forgot to hook one of the clips on, so I'm going to have to take that off and redo it. And then the inside's pretty awesome, covered too. So I am very happy with how this turned out. Very nervous about dropping 200 bucks on these, and they're not returnable, but man, I tell you what, this is awesome. All right, so we got this guy on. You got to make sure you get that inner clip. It's kind of a pain to put the dually flares or the dually mud flaps on the back. They're a little more challenging than the front. Anyway, so I was looking at it, and basically this corner normally would sit right flush with the outside of the flare. So if you look right here, and then draw right here, and draw a line down, if WeatherTech would make flaps for these flares, perfectly cover this tire up. Same thing up here. If we brought this out, it's harder to see up here, it would also perfectly cover. So WeatherTech does have a spot on their website where you can request new products. So I encourage all of you to go there and ask them to make WeatherTech mud flaps for Rebels, Power Wagons, and a wide version for dually trucks with the Power Wagon or Rebel flares. Low likelihood that they'll, accommodate to us, but it never hurts to try. Okay, here is the final product. Got her pulled out of the shop. It's about 15 degrees out right now, so it's a little bit cold. You can see kind of that area right there is just a little bit awkward looking, but that's just the WeatherTech mat. You can see the spats fit in beautifully to the mat, and in the video you probably can't even tell that I had to get in to these cracks, put that RTV in there. And I did wind up actually pushing the RTV through so it would come out flush on this side. I think that ends up looking a lot better. You can't see the void. You just have to stick your RTV tube and really shove it in there and then push hard until it comes out on this side. And then you can fold up a paper towel, put it down in the corner, and wipe it out, and then it comes out looking super clean. Shut the truck off so you can see the flaps and the tires without the exhaust fumes coming up. So now you can clearly see there's just a little bit of tire stick out, but it's not bad. I think it'll be bearable. Definitely looks way better now with these flaps on there than without. Don't got to worry about getting pulled over. Since it is a federal law, dualies have to have rear mud flaps for some reason. Just makes the truck look a lot more finished. There's no issues with the 35s rubbing on them or anything. Plenty of clearance in the back. So again, thanks for watching. I hope this video helps at least some of you out. I know there's other people on the forums asking for a more fitted solution when running the Power Wagon Rebel flares. I think this is good enough, unless you guys, again, are willing to go to WeatherTech and request this specific setup for a dually with the Rebel Power Wagon flares. Since that's not an OEM option, I doubt they're going to accommodate it. But I would think they'd be willing to accommodate the front, since the front's the same on single rear wheel and dually. Since the Power Wagon Rebel trim is such an expensive option, and there's a ton of them out there, I really do think they will maybe give in to our demands for a front pair. And at that point, that would just leave us having to customize these rear dually flares. Well, thanks again for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in the next video if I don't slip and die on my ice first.